This is Preetpal Kaur, and I'm interviewing Ronald Carr, advisor and coordinator of communications and comms major in TUJ.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, you have a very illustrious career before being a professor here. Can you give us a little bit background?
Well, I don't know how illustrious it was, but basically after grad school, I started working at ABC. So I was what's called a writer-producer, and predominantly talk radio and sports, as well as news. And that job was really interesting. We were producers at that time of the Dodgers. So one of the shows that I worked on was called Sports Talk, and it had a really interesting group of hosts. It was manned by a guy named Bud Ferrillo, who used to be the sports editor for the Herald Examiner. And he knew everybody. And, we would cover all the major sports. And for instance, during Christmas, New Year's season, this is the bowl games. So you have loads and loads of college games you cover. And basically, I'd work every day. And that includes Christmas and whatever. But it was a real close team thing. And I got to meet lots of interesting people, not only athletes, but in the news as well. You'd have lots of guests and the hosts themselves. Some of them were really, really interesting people. It was a fun environment. Something's always happening. It's not maybe as fun as college radio is, but because when you're working for a major network, things change a bit. It's union. It's more corporate. You don't have the same, freedom you would at a college radio station to do anything you want. But I found it to be, a great first job out of grad school.
Grad school. So, what pushed you to communications field?
Well, I'll tell you, my undergrad degree was in philosophy, and then I think at that time I was a debater. I was a debater in high school and college, so I probably thought about going into law, but then I changed. And I'd always been a writer, so I ended up going to graduate school in theater, film, and television at UCLA. And I basically graduated as a playwright, but I stayed on working on documentaries, so I took film classes. And then I ended up working in the industry itself. So it was sort of a transition, grad school for me. I really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the film analysis classes. I couldn't believe I was like being able to take a class where you just sit and watch movies and talk about them. It was quite a change from my undergrad academic background. I really enjoyed it. And I'd worked in college radio since my first semester in college, basically. And that's where I really learned about technical aspects, audio, sound recording, putting shows together, being a disc jockey, talk show host. And I never really thought of it at that time as a career. It was just something that was just really fun to do. And then once I finished grad school, I realized I had to get a job. And one of the things I was really qualified to do was to work in broadcasting. So that's what I did.
That sounds really interesting. Out of that career, what inspired you to become a professor?
Well, basically, I'd always liked teaching. And when I came to Tokyo, I came to take a break. I took a leave of absence from ABC. But a friend of mine that was in Tokyo had a connection with NHK. And before I knew it, we were producing shows for NHK. So I had wanted to take a break from broadcasting, but then I ended up going right back into it. And I did that for a few years. And then there was an opening at Temple University, Tokyo campus. And it was actually in theater. And I ended up taking that job. And then it turned out that at the old campus, they had all this great equipment that nobody really used. And I ended up starting teaching production classes. And then the administration was talking about having a major in communications. And one thing led to another, and I ended up putting that program together.
So Temple in the past didn't have a communications major.
The main campus did, but TUJ didn't, right? So we could only really mirror what the main campus has. And at that time, there were specific departments. But our campus wasn't developed enough to have any one particular department. So a interdisciplinary department, communications studies, was designed, and we ended up teaching that here at TUJ.
So why Japan?
Well, I knew people here. I had a friend in Bangkok in the Peace Corps. I had one of my oldest friends lived in Tokyo. There was a writer that had asked me to possibly adapt a book for a film, and he was in South Korea. And I thought, well, why not come out to Asia? And I knew I could work here. I didn't think it was going to be long term. I thought I would spend maybe at most a year or so. But then one thing led to another, and I ended up staying here. I had no particular interest in Japan. I think if you would have asked me, okay, where do you want to go for a year, it probably would have been somewhere in Europe or South America. But I ended up in Japan.
And how long have you been here?
A long time. I arrived about April 1990. I think it was April. I left April 16th. I got here on the 17th. I had salmonella poisoning that afternoon before, and I had to leave about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was hallucinating on the airplane coming here. And it was the first time I'd ever been out of the country. So it was quite a trip for me. And luckily my old friend was there, and all he wanted to do was go out and party and stuff. But I was so sick, I just laid on his futon for like 2 days. But yeah, that's how I got over here. And it was quite, I mean, it was a major move.
You just stayed here till now.
Well, I've been working, once I began working at TUJ, the whole developing the department took time, and it's a big commitment. And at a university, if you're working for any extended period of time, you tend to stay there. I mean, it's just that kind of a job. And I really enjoy teaching. It's fun. There's always something new. There's always students that are coming and going, and there's always projects to work on. And actually, at the campus here, you have a lot of freedom. You have a lot of freedom to work on projects. We've gotten seed grants. I've taken students along with my colleagues all over the world to do projects. So, I couldn't really do that when I'm working. It was only actually until I left America and came to Japan that I ever really travel. In fact, I had never even been to New York until I had first gone to Japan. So I was just so busy in California doing broadcasting and writing that I didn't really have time to travel, and everything was there. You've got the beaches, you've got the mountains, the desert. My friends were there, so I didn't have any real desire to travel until I decided to come to Japan.
Who inspires you in your field?
Well, if you talk about film, for example, there's so many. But if you look at contemporary directors, Miyazaki, for example, Scorsese, Coppola, I think some of the directors from the 40s and 50s, like Aldrich, for example, they really affected me. I grew up watching films with my father, Friday, Saturday nights on television. That in my generation, a lot of films would come out. They'd only be in the theater a relatively short time, and then you'd watch them on TV, and especially horror films and that sort of thing. And if you talk about film styles or so, I'm a big fan of documentaries. I do a lot of documentaries, so nonfiction. Frederick Weissman, for example, was a big influence. The way he recorded processes and how he revealed people, I thought was amazing. So yeah.
So you've done documentaries. What documentaries did you do?
Well, for instance, there's a couple projects we did. One was called Global Lives, and my colleague, Professor Herrera, and I were basically in charge of Asia. So we covered Tokyo, we covered Kazakhstan. We also went to a number of other countries. For instance, I believe she went to a few cities in India. And basically, this is a unique project. It's almost sociological, anthropological. And you basically follow someone around for like 24 hours straight. You even record them when you're sleeping. When they're sleeping. So that was very interesting. We were able to take students around, and that is a touring exhibition. It's online. The Global Lives actually received a large amount of money from the Endowment of the Arts. It's highly respected. Urban Villages was another project we started. We did after 3/11, the earthquake. I did a piece on energy conservation in Tokyo. We had students traveling all over Asia. I went to Manila, for example, and focused on disaster relief in areas like Smoky Mountain, where they have this tremendous poverty. And a lot of people are unable to get medical attention. And if you have storms coming in, their homes literally will just wash away. So we have done pieces like that. Most of the stuff I've done are either profiles on individuals or on issues, problems.
What are your hobbies?
What are my hobbies? Well, I'm actually still a swimmer. I'm an athlete. I was a swimmer when I was younger. And master swimming is huge in Japan. Nationals will have like 7,000, 8,000 people. I think the Japanese are into basically physical health because they're very well educated about issues like Alzheimer's and things like that. So this is one way I think the older Japanese deal with trying to be healthy and trying to keep alert. So I guess you could say athletics, swimming in this case, is a hobby. I'm not really a hobby person per se. The stuff that I do is somehow related to what I do. So, yeah, I'm always reading, but I'm a writer, so I have to do that. I don't know, sometimes I think in Tokyo, just being able to relax and get away, playing around with my two sons, things like that. And so, I don't know, I'm not a hobby person like in Japan they think of hobby, but I definitely like to keep active.
Do you miss anything from your past, any of the broadcasting?
Well, I miss working with people in broadcasting. It's a very different group of people compared to academia. Academia is usually more so than not research-based, and you work in a TV or radio station. It's a lot of pressure, but everybody is very professional. They all do their jobs, and funny, clever people. And I kind of miss that because in some ways there's more pressure, but there's release valves for it. Often in Japan you have a lot of pressure, but there's no real way to release it. So I miss the spontaneity. There was a lot of live programming, so that's always fun to do. You never know what's going to happen. I think there's other things that I might miss about the States. It has a certain lifestyle, especially I'm from Southern California. So the beaches, missing friends, but when you move away from a place for a long time, things change. You may not think they change, but everybody changes. So you can't really just walk back and jump back into the past. So sometimes I think I'd like to, I imagine, go back for a little bit, but I don't know. I don't know if that would let me down because it's not going to be like it was when I was much younger and living there and living the kind of lifestyle I did. It's very different.
What do you like about being a professor?
I like the flexibility. I like getting up and speaking. I like hearing young people talk, reactions. I like to think that some of the stuff that I do teach in the classroom, that all faculty teach in the classroom, it really has an important effect, making young people think, question. That way they're taking something away. Like in broadcasting, you're producing major market programming. You're really just generating money. That's all you're doing. Some of the programming can be very interesting. A lot of it is just killing time. But when you're in a classroom, you really aren't just killing time. You are doing something. People are listening to you, hopefully they're engaged and they take away something from that so they become better. And that's one of the main differences I see in when you work in a teaching environment versus maybe a professional environment like in the entertainment industry.
And how many places have you lived? You've lived in California.
Well, until I came to Japan, really I lived only in the States, and the majority of that was in California. When I came to Japan, it was basically Chiba where I first went, and then I made my way to Tokyo, and then basically it's been in Tokyo. I've traveled a lot. I've traveled a lot in Europe, in Britain, but other than that, I haven't really lived that many different places.
Any places you prefer?
Well, I like Japan. In many ways, it's very comfortable. It's predictable to live. I don't know about what it would be like to live in the States again, and especially how things have changed the way, I mean, that's my perception. They've changed. You take so many things for granted in Japan, the friendliness, the promptness, things work. You go back to LA, you try to make a phone call on a payphone, the payphone doesn't work, nobody can give you change. These little things, you go to McDonald's, you buy, something and half of it's missing. In Japan, it's like this would be bizarre for that to happen. So you get used to this, and to go back can be difficult, I think. I think it would be for me. I get really impatient. I miss driving. I don't drive here, but I lived in my car when I was back in the States. And that's something I actually do miss, though it's much more relaxing to be on a train. Driving in LA is really crazy.
Yeah.
It can take forever to get from one place to another. You're in a hurry. There's an accident. Everybody's looking at the accident. You miss appointments, or reviews, or you have to be at work at some point. So, I like it here, though I enjoy other cities in Asia, for example. Malaysia is very interesting. Thailand's interesting parts of it.
Do you have any advice to incoming communications majors?
Well, know what you want to do. Have goals. Know your career. That's important. I think you should do that even before you go to college. You should look at yourself and say, what am I good at? What are my skills and talents? Usually, those qualities will evoke positive responses from other people. Do that as a career. I remember in college, so many students, parents, for instance, had pressured them into the medical profession. Go to med school, go to dental school, go to law school. And it wasn't what they wanted to do, and they'd always felt as if they'd failed. Luckily, most of them worked that out. But I sort of knew what I wanted to do, even when I was really young. And I'm very fortunate for that. But I think that's what you need to do. Because much of what you learn in college, unless you take it and put it in a certain direction, it's kind of all lost. It's just another class. It's just more information, right? So, when you choose a major, I think you should choose a major that makes you think. I think you choose a major that you enjoy, you actually learn from. It's part of you. It's an extension of you.
How about current communication students? Any advice about classes or anything?
Well, I think you should take the classes that benefit you. For instance, it looks like we'll be having a production track coming on, and that's one skill set that actually will get you a job. People who go into broadcasting tend to be professionally based. When they graduate, they want to start working in their profession. And it's that kind of skill training that works. I think if you're going to be a writer, for example, a journalist, take every writing intensive class you can, more than you need, because you need to write. This is especially true for those students who are going to work in English, but maybe English is not their native language. So you need to do that. For students that want to stay in Japan, you need to study Japanese. And this is what I tell students when they first come here to TJ every semester. If you want to stay in Japan, you need to study Japanese. Working in the industry here is challenging, but it's expanding. But you need to be able to function within Japanese society. And a big element of that is, of course, speaking Japanese.
Any advice to graduating students?
It's going to be rough, or it could just work out for you. It depends. I have always felt that you should know something that you could fall back on. You should always be gainfully employed. Always be employed. In the entertainment industry, that's the difference between somebody who's in the entertainment industry and who isn't. It's simply being employed. It's looked at that way. So if you're going to go into broadcasting, journalism, filmmaking, you need to do it. But you may not be able to do exactly what you want. This is normal. Don't be afraid to do something else to make money and then do what you want to do. And then once you're able to do that specific creative venture, then go for that. What you don't want to do is put off your dream too long by working. So you have to balance it. Otherwise, you just won't want to do it. And if you're going to work in filmmaking, journalism, a lot of professions like advertising, for example, and PR, you really need to start it when you're young, when you have a lot of energy, because it takes physical energy to do these jobs. Then you build up this experience, and now you've got the professional experience, and you can, move up.
Any surprising facts about you?
Oh, no, I don't reveal facts about myself. I'd rather have them revealed naturally.
Through classes and whatnot.
That's it. Yep.
Anything you want to add that was missing?
Well, no, but I think that, for instance, we're moving to a new campus, Showa, and that's exciting. That should be a good thing, I think. You'll have more space for the filmmakers. They can probably shoot on campus. You'll have the ability to walk onto a real campus. I mean, I think it's amazing here that students, I really respect them. That you can go to a university day after day, year after year, that's basically in a building. Now students will actually have a campus. I think that's a good thing. So I think they should, even though it might sound like, oh, I don't really want to move, I like this area, really, on balance, it's probably one of the best things that's ever happened here.
What does the move mean to the communication studies overall?
Well, we'll have a new building. We have a new production area. It'll have more space. You'll have places to shoot, for example. I think for communication studies, it's like any major. You'll just have more technology, more opportunities. I think the general excitement will be higher of being on a campus.
You were talking about the production track probably coming through. You want to explain?
Well, what will happen is once it's approved, students can choose either audio or video to focus on. And it's the same number of credits. It's just that the courses, half of those courses are production. If you take production now, only one class counts. So that means you'll have many more classes that'll count. And it actually will be geared towards production, which I think is great because we do have a lot of students here that are interested in production.
So thank you very much for participating.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here.